Ezra's voice cut through the gilded silence of the New York charity gala, like a blade forged in Arctic ice. 20,000 hand-cut crystal prisms hung from the chandeliers, casting flawless light over Manhattan's elite, hedge fund titans, media heirs, a former Secretary of State swirling a flute of Dom Perignon. Every single pair of eyes in the room was fixed on the spectacle unfolding at the auction podium. Lydia's left wrist was locked in his grip, her swollen fingers pinned against the velvet display case. Ezra's jaw was a slab of marble carved with contempt. His gaze didn't so much as flick toward his wife of 3 years. Instead, he looked past her, straight at the woman in the wheelchair. Sera, draped in a pale apricot Oscar de la Renta gown, her face the color of old porcelain. She pressed a lace handkerchief to her chest, each breath a theatrical rasp, tears trembling on her lower lashes, like dew on a dying rose. "Ezra, please. Don't make a scene on my account." Sera's voice floated out, thin as tissue paper, frayed at the edges. "I only noticed the ring on Lydia's finger, that antique cushion-cut diamond. It's identical to the one my grandmother left me. I lost it years ago, and I've never stopped grieving it. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months left. I thought if I could bid on it tonight, I'd have something to hold on to. But it's not worth this. Truly." Her words landed like a lit match on gasoline. Ezra's fingers constricted around Lydia's wrist with such brute force that she heard the faint grinding of her own carpal bones. The pain was a hot wire racing up her arm, but she made no sound. "I can't take it off," Lydia said, her voice low but unbroken. Ezra laughed, dry, hollow, devoid of humor. "Can't or won't? Do you have a single ounce of empathy in that hollow chest of yours?" He leaned in, his breath sour with scotch, his whisper meant to humiliate. "It's a 5-carat trinket. Tomorrow I'll have Cartier deliver a full suite necklace, earrings, a damned tiara if you want. Sera is dying, Lydia. And you choose this moment, in front of every major donor on the East Coast, to play the wounded martyr?" "This ring was never a gift from you," Lydia said, her eyes dropping to her own swollen knuckles. "It was my grandmother's. The only thing she left me when she passed. I've worn it since I was 16. Spare me the sentimental nonsense." Ezra's patience snapped. He grabbed her hand, brutally, without warning, and wrenched at the ring. Her fingers, bloated from the early pregnancy she'd discovered only 2 weeks ago, had swollen past the platinum band. The metal gouged a crescent of flesh from her knuckle, and warm blood welled up, trickling between his fingers and hers, dripping onto the white linen tablecloth in slow, obscene commas. With one final vicious tug, the ring came free. Ezra flicked it onto the silver auction platter as if discarding a cigarette butt. It clattered, spun, and skittered off the edge, bouncing across the crimson savannah carpet and out through the massive double doors into the marble foyer. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom, then a murmur, low and hungry, the sound of vultures circling. Lydia stood with her bleeding hand dangling at her side. Blood spotted the hem of her custom Vera Wang gown, tiny ruby droplets blooming against the ivory silk. Her fingers trembled involuntarily. "Was that really necessary?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ezra straightened his bow tie, adjusting the platinum cufflinks engraved with the Bancroft family crest. "Necessary? No. Deserved? Absolutely." He looked down at her with the same disdain he might reserve for a maid who chipped a Sèvres vase. "You've always been greedy, Lydia. Greedy for attention, greedy for status, greedy for anything that isn't yours. Sera has weeks, maybe days, of dignity left. And you couldn't even give her a memory without a fight. It's revolting." The room swayed. A wave of nausea, violent, acidic, climbed Lydia's throat. She stepped back, one heel catching on the carpet fringe, but Ezra misinterpreted the movement. He thought she was about to bolt for the foyer, to retrieve the ring like a common street urchin chasing a dropped penny. His face darkened. In one fluid, practiced motion, he drew back his hand and delivered a backhanded slap across her left cheek. Loud, sharp, the crack of it echoing off the vaulted ceilings like a gunshot. The orchestra faltered. The string quartet's violinist missed a note. Silence fell. Absolute. Suffocating. The kind that happens only when New York's finest realize they are witnessing something they can recount at every dinner party for the next decade. Lydia's head snapped to the side. Her ear rang with a high-pitched whine. The taste of iron flooded her mouth. She had bitten the inside of her cheek. Her vision blurred, then cleared, and she saw Sera's lips curl into the faintest ghost of a smile, before dissolving back into sickly innocence. "Mrs. Bancroft," Ezra said, adjusting his jacket with theatrical calm, "if you cannot muster even basic decency, you have no place at this table, or in this family. Apologize to Sera. Now. Then have your driver take you back to Bedford. Stay there until I return, and I suggest you use that time to reflect on what you've become." 200 pairs of eyes, pitying, gleeful, morbidly fascinated, pinned her to the spotlight. Lydia Bancroft, heiress to a Boston shipping fortune, wife of the youngest CEO in Bancroft Group history, reduced to a bloodied spectacle for the amusement of the 1%. Slowly, she turned her head back. She did not raise a hand to her flaming cheek. She did not blink back tears. She simply looked at Ezra, truly looked, as if seeing him for the first time in 3 years of marriage. And in that gaze, something quietly died. A door closed. A lock turned. Ezra felt a sudden, inexplicable chill race down his spine. His fingers twitched at his side. "Fine," Lydia said, one word, flat, final. She did not approach Sera. She did not glance at Ezra again. She pivoted on her Manolo Blahniks, one heel now scuffed, and walked the length of the ballroom, past the whispering clusters of billionaires and their bored wives, through the towering oak doors, and into the cold marble foyer. The night air hit her like a slap. Outside, rain lashed the windows in sheets, a classic New York thunderstorm rolling off the Hudson. She stopped at the base of the grand staircase, near the brass kickplate. There, on the polished travertine, lay the ring, tarnished with floor wax, a single drop of her own blood, still crusted on the prong. She bent down, picked it up, and closed her fist around it. The doorman, a stout Irishman named Patrick, rushed forward with a black umbrella. "Mrs. Bancroft, let me call your car." She waved him off without a word. She walked out into the deluge, the rain instantly soaking her hair, her gown, her ruined shoes. She crossed Fifth Avenue at a dead sprint, dodging a yellow cab, and stopped at the corner storm grate, the one that drained into the city's ancient, fetid sewer system. She opened her palm. The diamond caught the sickly amber glow of a street lamp. Her grandmother's voice, from 20 years ago, echoed in her skull. "This ring has been in our family since the Titanic sailed, my love. It's survived wars, depressions, and 3 divorces. It will survive anything." Lydia let it fall. A soft plink, and it was gone, swallowed by the black sludge below, never to be retrieved. The moment the ring vanished, a cramp seized her lower abdomen, sharp, twisting, merciless. She doubled over, clutching the lamppost, and retched into the gutter. Nothing came up but bitter bile. She hadn't eaten all night, too anxious about the announcement she had planned. She had wanted to tell Ezra tonight, after the auction, in the privacy of the penthouse. A sonogram photo tucked in her clutch. A due date in late winter. But now, as the rain beat down and the pain intensified into a deep, dragging pull, she felt the warm gush between her thighs. Thin and watery, then thicker, unmistakable. She looked down. Diluted pink rivulets ran over her ankles, swirling into the storm drain. 2 weeks, she had known for 2 weeks, and she had never told him. She stared at the fading stain on the wet pavement, her reflection fractured in a puddle. Her hand drifted to her belly, still flat, still empty now. No tears came. Not one. Her face was stone, her heart a frozen vault. She straightened slowly, wiped rain from her eyes, and began the long, solitary walk downtown, past the shuttered boutiques, the homeless veterans huddled under awnings, the neon glow of an all-night diner. Her phone buzzed in her soaked clutch. Ezra's name flashed on the screen. She declined the call, then she blocked the number. At the corner of 14th Street, she hailed a cab. The driver, a young woman with a nose ring and a bored expression, glanced in the rear view. "You okay, lady? You're bleeding all over my seat." "Just drive," Lydia said, her voice hollow. "Mount Sinai, ER." She leaned her head against the cold window, watching the city blur past. She did not cry. She would not cry. Not tonight. Not ever again for a man who had traded her grandmother's legacy for a dying woman's performance, and her unborn child's life for a moment of brutal theater. Tomorrow she would call her lawyer. Tomorrow she would call the New York Post. Tomorrow she would burn Ezra Bancroft's world to the ground. But tonight she simply let the rain wash her clean. The emergency waiting room at Mount Sinai smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Plastic chairs held a drunk from Brooklyn, a pregnant woman groaning through contractions, and a man with half his face wrapped in bandages who looked like he belonged in a mob movie. Lydia sat in the farthest corner, her soaked gown clinging to her skin, rainwater and blood mixing into a pale pink sludge that spread in a small stain across the tile floor. The nurse called her name 3 times before she slowly stood. The young doctor who met her eyes. Dr. Chen, her badge read, Chief Resident, took one look at the blood on her hem, and her expression turned grim. "How long have you been bleeding? Any severe abdominal pain?" "Started about 2 hours ago." Lydia's voice sounded like it came from somewhere far away, a voice she barely recognized. "I think I might have miscarried." Dr. Chen asked no further questions. She wheeled Lydia into an exam room, ordered an ultrasound and blood work. The cold transducer pressed against Lydia's lower belly as she stared at the ceiling cracks and counted. 1, 2, 3. She'd reached 17 when the doctor set the probe down. "The embryonic tissue has cleared, no retained products, but your endometrial lining is significantly damaged. You are about 6 weeks along, now confirmed complete miscarriage." Dr. Chen removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "You need rest and monitoring for infection. Your hemoglobin is low. I recommend overnight observation." Lydia nodded. She felt no urge to cry. The pain in her abdomen had dulled to a hollow numbness, as if someone had reached inside and scooped out the warmest part of her, replacing it with ice. "Should we contact your family?" Dr. Chen asked. "No," Lydia paused. "But can you print me a complete record? Ultrasound images and all the lab results?" Dr. Chen studied her for a moment, the kind of look that said she'd seen this before, women too shattered to show it, and simply nodded. At 3 a.m., Lydia sat on the hard bed of a private room, clutching the still warm printed medical records. She folded them carefully into her clutch, beside the only thing the swallowed ring had left behind, an old photo of herself and her grandmother on Martha's Vineyard. She picked up her phone. No new messages. Ezra hadn't called again. Probably busy comforting Sera, or playing the righteous husband in front of the city's elite. She let out a cold laugh and scrolled to a name she hadn't touched in 3 years. Helen Wu. Helen had been her roommate at Wellesley. These days, she was the most feared divorce lawyer in New York, specializing in ultra-high-net-worth clients. She'd taken down at least 5 billionaires. They hadn't spoken in 3 years, but Lydia knew Helen would be awake at this hour. She'd posted an Instagram story at 4 a.m. last week. "Just finished a brief. Coffee is life." She pressed call. 2 rings. Helen picked up, her voice sharp and clear. "Who's this?" "Helen, it's Lydia Bancroft." A pause. "I need you to get me a divorce. As fast as possible. And I need you to look into someone, Sera Morrison. She claims she's dying of cancer. I think she's lying. 2 seconds of silence. Then Helen said, "You finally decided to ditch that bastard? I've been waiting for this call for 3 years. Where are you? I'll be there in 20. Mount Sinai. Maternity ward, 3rd floor. Are you hurt?" Helen's voice sharpened. "Not badly, but there's something I need you to see." Helen hung up. Lydia set the phone on her knee and stared out the window. The rain was still falling over Manhattan, streaks of water blurring the distant silhouette of the Chrysler Building. She remembered the first time she'd met Ezra, also a rainy night, at a charity gala at the New York Public Library. He'd walked over with 2 cocktails, smiling, asking if she was lost. His eyes had been all warmth then, now they were only ice. She switched off the lamp and waited in the dark for Helen's footsteps. She wouldn't shed a single tear for that man, but she would make every corner of Manhattan's high society watch his tears fall. How long, how ugly, on her terms. Helen Wu pushed open the hospital room door in a crisp black skirt suit and flat loafers, clearly fresh from her office. A young assistant followed with a laptop and a portable scanner. "Here, change." Helen tossed a clean velvet tracksuit and wool socks onto the bed. "Brand new, tags still on." "I figured you wouldn't have luggage." Lydia took the food but didn't touch it yet. She pushed the medical records and ultrasound images across the table. Helen put on her glasses, flipped through page after page, and her brow only tightened. 6-week miscarriage caused by external trauma and acute emotional stress. Helen read the diagnosis aloud, then looked straight at Lydia. "Who did this to you? Your husband?" Lydia recounted the gala in full. Helen listened without surprise, without comfort, just cold, focused silence as she tapped notes into her tablet. "All right. First, we have witnesses. At least 200 of New York's finest watched him hit you. Second, physical evidence, your gown and the hospital report. Third, motive, public humiliation of his wife for another woman. That's domestic violence and negligent homicide of an unborn child. Criminal charges are viable, and civil damages alone would strip him of half his net worth." "I don't care about the money." Lydia's voice was flat. "I want his reputation in ruins. I want Sera's true face exposed. I want the Bancroft Group board to know what kind of animal their CEO is." Helen smiled, a thin, predatory curve. "Money is just a tool. Reputation is the weapon. I'll have the Times and the Wall Street Journal fighting for your exclusive. But first, we need Sera's medical records. What makes you suspect fraud?" Lydia replayed every detail from the gala. The way Sera's cough always worsened exactly when Ezra turned his head. The faint, almost imperceptible curl at the corner of her mouth when she mentioned her months to live. And her hands, pale, yes, but with manicured nails in the latest Chanel shade. No chemo patient had that kind of time. "Instinct," Lydia said. "But my instinct is usually right." Helen nodded. "Instinct won't hold up in court, but it's enough to start an investigation. I've got a private investigator, ex-FBI, specializes in medical fraud. Give me 72 hours, and I'll dig up everything from Sera's birth certificate to every Starbucks she's bought in the last 3 months." "Cost isn't an issue," Lydia said. "Your grandmother's trust fund is still locked at Boston Trust, right? I remember you signed a prenup. Bancroft can't touch that money." "Correct, and I still hold 15% of my father's shipping company. Bancroft Group has been trying to buy that route. Those 15% are a veto." Helen's eyes lit up. "So you've got leverage. And a nuke. Good. Here's what you need to do. 1. Move out of the Bancroft estate. I've already found a secure apartment on the Upper East Side. Key code access only, your fingerprint. 2. Stay silent on social media, but let me drop a few anonymous hints to the tabloids. Let them do the digging. 3. See a therapist, not for healing, but for a formal trauma assessment we can use in court." Lydia agreed to all of it. She took a sip of the warm soy milk. It slid down her throat and thawed something frozen inside her. "Helen," she said suddenly, "do you think he'll regret it?" Helen set down her glasses and looked at her squarely. "Whether he regrets it or not doesn't matter. What matters is, when you stand in front of a judge or a press conference, and you look at him, do you still hurt?" Lydia considered it. No. Just disgusted. "Then you're ready. Disgust is the best cure for blindness." Helen closed her tablet. Sleep. War starts at dawn. Lydia didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and counted the cracks again. 23 this time. She remembered the doctor in the Midtown clinic 2 weeks ago, smiling at the ultrasound screen. "Congratulations, Mrs. Bancroft. You're pregnant." The heartbeat is strong. Ezra had been in London. She'd planned to surprise him. She'd even bought a baby room design book and hidden it in the top shelf of her walk-in closet. Those books were probably still there, alongside the dozens of couture gowns, hundreds of shoes, a dozen Hermes Birkins Ezra had bought her. Now they all smelled like rotting macarons, too sweet, too old. She buried her face in the pillow and finally slipped into dreamless sleep as the first light of dawn crept through the blinds. 3 days later, Lydia moved into the safe apartment on East 78th Street, a penthouse in a pre-war building, private elevator, windows overlooking a courtyard of Japanese maples. Silent, secluded, walled off from Manhattan's noise. She'd changed her number, sharing it only with Helen and her personal assistant. Helen's investigation moved faster than promised. On the 4th evening, she rang the doorbell with a thick file folder and a lean, gray-haired man in tow. Mark Carson, ex-FBI, Medical Fraud Division. "We've got something." Helen spread the folder across the dining table. Inside, Sera Morrison's insurance claims from the past 2 years, copies of medical records from 3 separate hospitals, and a set of photographs. Sera in a bikini on a Miami beach, sipping a cocktail, her abdomen scar-free, her skin sun-kissed. Date stamp. 3 months ago. She doesn't have cancer. Mark tapped the photos. She did go to a private oncology center for a single PET CT. Results came back completely clear. She's been clinic shopping ever since, claiming suspected late stage at each one, but she's never received chemo or radiation because no physician ever prescribed it. She bribed a junior pharmacist to fake empty bottles of targeted therapy to show Ezra. The bottles were filled with vitamin B12. Lydia flipped through the documents, her fingertips cold. Ezra's brilliant. How did he fall for this? Helen's smile was wry. Because he wanted to fall for it. Guilt plus hero complex is a hell of a filter. Sera was his college girlfriend. She dumped him for an oil heir back then. Now she comes back playing the damsel in distress. And it feeds every fantasy he ever had. The more rational you were, the colder you seemed. The more fragile she looked, the more she deserved his protection. "So what's our move?" Lydia asked. Step 1. I've already leaked anonymously to page 6. Top finance CEO punches pregnant wife at charity gala. No names yet, but enough for the tabloids to sniff around. Step 2. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm sending a formal demand to the Bancroft Group board for a special shareholder meeting. You hold more than 5%. You have the right to call a vote of no confidence. Step 3. Ezra will get the tabloid call before he gets the board letter. He'll rage, he'll try to find you, and he won't. Then he'll go to Sera, by which time she won't know her own records have been copied 3 ways. Mark added, "We've got a tap on her phone. She's been in touch with a man named Danny, her old boyfriend from Miami. They're planning to skip town together. She's been siphoning Ezra's money as well as his heart." Lydia closed her eyes and breathed deep. She remembered her grandmother's words, spoken on her deathbed. "Lydia, real strength isn't never falling. It's getting up and squeezing the dirt in your hands until it turns to stone." She opened her eyes. Send everything. Board, media, and Sera's Danny. All at once. Helen smiled like a hunter sighting prey. Now that's the Lydia I remember. On the 47th floor of Bancroft Group's Midtown headquarters, the Hudson River blazed orange through floor-to-ceiling windows. Ezra Bancroft frowned at the quarterly report on his screen when his assistant James knocked, looking like three-day-old meat. "Sir, a fax from a law firm. A special shareholder meeting summons, and board member Henry Knowles just called. He's received a copy and wants to confirm this is with your authorization." Ezra took the paper. His pupils contracted at the words, "Shareholder Lydia Bancroft." How does she even have the board's contact information? She's never attended a single shareholder meeting. "Sir, there's more." James handed over a phone. The screen opened to the New York Post. "Finance Prince's charity night slap. Pregnant wife bleeds on auction floor." The article didn't name names, but it described in detail a Bancroft family patriarch, and his wife rushed to the hospital with a confirmed miscarriage. A grainy photo accompanied it. Lydia in the rain, drenched, dark stains spreading on her gown. Ezra's temples throbbed. He dialed Lydia. No answer. He dialed again. Voicemail. Texts, emails. All dead. He called the estate manager. "Mrs. Bancroft hasn't been back in 3 days, sir. Her personal effects were removed." A cold snake slithered down his collar. He told himself she was just sulking. She'd always used silence as a weapon. But the board summons was official, signed by lawyers. This wasn't a tantrum. He grabbed his coat and drove to Sera's apartment, a Tribeca penthouse he'd leased for $38,000 a month, because she needed a quiet place to rest. The elevator doors opened to laughter, Sera's voice, and a man's. He pushed the door open. Sera sat on the white sofa in a silk nightgown, and across from her, Danny, a bearded fitness trainer with full-sleeve tattoos, spooned mango sticky rice into her mouth. Travel magazines lay open on the coffee table, flipped to the Maldives. Sera's smile froze for half a second, then melted into her practiced sickly expression. "Ezra, what are you doing here?" Cough. "I'm feeling a bit better. Danny is my physical therapist." Ezra's eyes fixed on the man's chest. The muscles under the ink were solid, sculpted, nothing like a caregiver's. Then he glanced at the trash can. Empty pill bottles with labels reading, ondansetron, anti-nausea meds. But he recognized them. He'd bought those from a specialty pharmacy himself. The packaging was different. He walked over and picked one up. Sera's face went pale. "Ezra, don't misunderstand." He unscrewed the lid. 2 little white tablets spilled out. He knew those, vitamin B12. He had a bottle in his own desk drawer. For several seconds he stood there, brain a dead server. Then his own voice came from somewhere far away. "Your cancer was fake?" Sera opened her mouth, tears springing on cue. But this time Ezra felt only nausea. He remembered Lydia's bleeding fingers, her swollen cheek, and that last look she'd given him. Empty, hollow, like a burned-out house with nothing left but the frame. He hurled the bottle against the wall. Glass shattered. "You ruined me. You ruined me." Danny stepped between them. "Hey man, calm down." "Shut up!" Ezra pointed at him, his voice cracking. "You're her lover? The 2 of you conned me? For money? For this apartment? Everything I gave you." Sera sobbed. "Ezra, I love you. I only lied because I was terrified you'd go back to her." "You were afraid of losing me?" Ezra laughed like it hurt. "Do you know what I lost? My child? I killed my own child. I hid her in front of 200 people, and she was innocent." He stumbled backward, hitting the doorframe. His phone buzzed. Chairman Henry Knowles. "Ezra, we've received a shareholder motion for emergency meeting. Also, media has gathered downstairs. Please respond." He didn't respond. He shoved the phone in his pocket, ran down the stairs, drove aimlessly through Manhattan, from Tribesea to the Upper East Side, from Columbus Circle to the south end of Central Park, and finally stopped, face buried in his steering wheel. He remembered the wedding day. Lydia in her lace gown, stepping down the church steps, sunlight on her shoulders, smiling. Look, grandmother's ring goes perfectly with these white roses. He'd thought the old diamond was a bit dated. She'd said it was her most precious possession. Now that ring lay in a sewer. His child was watered down a drain. He started shaking, hands, shoulders, the whole body, like a fever. He called Helen Wu's office. She answered. Mr. Bancroft, I've been waiting for this call. Her voice was ice. Let me speak to Lydia, please. Just let me. She doesn't wish to speak with you directly, but I'll relay one thing. If you want to salvage anything, resign at the board meeting. That's the only precondition for her to discuss divorce terms. Resign? Ezra's voice cracked. You have two options, Mr. Bancroft. Leave gracefully with some reputation and assets intact, or be ousted, face criminal domestic violence charges, and watch Sarah Morrison's fraud case lead straight to you. If you cooperate, you may get leniency. If you fight, Lydia will make every off-book transaction you've ever touched public. Consider carefully. The line went dead. Ezra leaned back in his seat, watching a young couple push a stroller past his window, the mother bending to kiss her baby's cheek. His eyes burned, but the tears stuck somewhere in his throat. He drove to East 78th Street, not knowing the exact address, only that Helen's office was nearby. He circled the block, squinting at every lit window, hoping one held her silhouette. 3 full laps. His phone buzzed. A long message from Sera. Ezra, I'm sorry. I'll move out tomorrow. I'll pay back what I can. But remember, you did love me, and I loved you. We were just both too selfish. He didn't reply. He parked by a fire hydrant, closed his eyes. As he did, a light went out in the penthouse across the street. Lydia stood in the dark, watching the familiar black Bentley stop and then glide away. In her hand was a cup of chamomile tea. Helen didn't look up from her files. See him? Yeah. Does it hurt? Lydia took a sip. No, just, the person I thought would love me forever never actually existed. She set the cup down, walked to the bedroom door, and turned back. Tomorrow, I watch him resign. Then we talk terms. Helen nodded. Outside, rain began again. New York autumns came hard and wet, stripping the city's leaves in a single night. Lydia closed the bedroom door, found the old photo of her grandmother on the nightstand, and flipped it over. On the back, in faded ink, a single line. No love, no chains. She whispered it once, then closed her eyes. Tomorrow's battles were many, but she was no longer afraid. The Bancroft Group boardroom on the 47th floor was a cathedral of glass and walnut designed by an Italian architect. The 20-seat oval table bristled with touchscreens and embedded microphones. Each leather chair cost more than a used sedan. Today, every seat was filled except Ezra's 15 in person, 3 more via video from London and Hong Kong. Lydia sat at the far end, the minor shareholder's spot. But today, she wore a sharp emerald wool skirt suit, her grandmother's antique pearl necklace at her throat, the only heirloom she'd managed to rescue from the estate safe. Her makeup was clean, her lipstick a cool rose mauve. She looked like a freshly awned blade, quiet but dangerously reflective. Ezra walked in and everyone saw the difference. His collar was loose, tie askew, dark circles under his eyes, 2 days stubble on his jaw. Compared to the immaculate figure who'd struck her 3 nights ago, he was a sodden peacock. He didn't look at Lydia. He couldn't. Chairman Henry Knowles, a white-haired septuagenarian, 30-year Goldman veteran, cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, this special shareholder meeting has been called on a motion of no confidence in the CEO. We require a majority vote. Each side has 30 minutes to state their case. Mr. Bancroft, you may go first. Ezra rose, hands braced on the table, knuckles white. His first words weren't about quarterly performance or projections, just a raw, scraping rasp. I have no right to stand here and say these things. His voice was sandpaper on wood. At the charity gala last week, I committed an unforgivable act of violence against my wife. In public, before 200 guests, I slapped her. I tore her grandmother's ring from her finger, the only heirloom she had, and caused her to miscarry our child. I didn't even know she was pregnant, because I never gave her the chance to tell me. The room went silent. A few directors exchanged glances. Someone removed their glasses. Ezra went on, voice trembling. I also confess that I was deceived by a woman named Sera Morrison, who fabricated a terminal illness. Under her manipulation, I made numerous decisions that violated both personal ethics and business judgment, including funneling over $2.3 million from company accounts to cover her medical and living expenses. Those funds are unrecoverable. I accept full personal liability. He finished and finally lifted his head toward the far end of the table. His eyes swam with something wet, but Lydia's face gave nothing away. She looked at him like a stranger, or a biologist observing a struggling insect. Therefore, Ezra said, inhaling deep, I hereby tender my resignation as CEO and chairman of Bancroft Group, effective immediately. I will cooperate fully with the internal audit and the FBI's investigation into Sera Morrison, and I will accept all legal consequences. He placed a black fountain pen on the table, as if laying down a scepter. No one applauded. Henry Nolles accepted the handwritten letter in silence, then turned to Lydia. Mrs. Bancroft, do you accept this resignation, or do you wish to proceed with the no-confidence vote? Lydia rose slowly. She was half a head shorter than Ezra. But in that moment, every eye in the room looked up at her. I accept his resignation, she said, her voice flat as a lake. But I will not withdraw the domestic violence charges. I will not accept any out-of-court settlement. My lawyer and I have filed a complete medical report and witness list with the Manhattan District Attorney. This will be decided by law, not by this board. All color drained from Ezra's face. He opened his mouth, but Lydia had already turned to Nolles. Mr. Nolles, as a shareholder, I move that a temporary CEO search committee be formed within 30 days. I also request a full audit of all expenditures connected to Morrison over the past 3 years, not just medical bills, but any payments routed through third-party vendors to offshore accounts. I suspect this isn't just a personal fraud case, but a regulatory failure within the company. Nolles nodded. Reasonable. We'll initiate an independent audit and produce a preliminary report within 3 weeks. The meeting dissolved in silence. Directors filed out. None paused to shake Ezra's hand. He sat alone at the empty table, a shipwreck left by a receding tide. At the door, Lydia stopped. She didn't turn. Her parting words were barely audible. Ezra, now you know what it feels like to sit in the ruins. Welcome to my world. The elevator doors closed. She leaned against the metal wall and closed her eyes. Her fingertips trembled, not from fear, but from release, the floodwaters of years finally breaking through a dam. She texted Helen. Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2. Helen's reply was instant. Got it. 8 a.m. tomorrow, NYT exclusive. You set the tone. I'll run defense. The New York Times interview was set in a private art gallery in Lower Manhattan. Lydia wore a cream knit top and deep blue wide-leg trousers, seated before a massive abstract expressionist canvas, red and black swirling together, a wound and a flame. The journalist was Catherine Yu, a Pulitzer winner known for her piercing, no-nonsense style. She covered power and gender. She wouldn't pull punches. Lydia didn't want her to. Catherine's first question, Mrs. Bancroft, why did you decide to speak publicly? Lydia leaned forward, hands clasped. Because silence is mistaken for consent, and I've consented too long. For 3 years, I stood half a step behind my husband at every public event, smiling at every decision he made. I thought that was support, dignity, until the night he slapped me in front of New York's most powerful people, and I finally saw. That wasn't dignity. That was domestication. You lost your child that night. Had you told Ezra you were pregnant? Lydia paused. The corner of her mouth softened. I planned to tell him after the gala. The ultrasound photo was in my clutch. A surprise. But that night, the blood from the ring he tore off me and the child all flowed out together. I never got the chance to tell him. Maybe that's for the best. He didn't deserve to be that child's father. Catherine pressed, "What do you want to say to Sera Morrison, now that she's in federal custody?" Lydia's expression hardened, just a flicker. I don't hate her. Hate requires caring. She's just a grifter who exploited a broken system. And that system was broken because men like Ezra would rather believe a woman who invents a tragedy than trust a wife who stood by them for 3 years. That's the real problem. When a woman's vulnerability is packaged as needing to be saved, a woman's strength gets read as not needing to be cherished. The interview ran 90 minutes. Catherine's final question was unexpected. Do you regret it? Marrying Ezra Bancroft? Lydia was quiet so long the cameraman behind the lens shifted nervously. Then she said, "No, because without that marriage, I wouldn't have seen the rot beneath all the polish. I wouldn't have known I could stand so steady. I wouldn't have realized that what I lost wasn't love. Because it was never there, only the ghost of one." The interview ran Saturday morning, front page, above the fold. Online, it hit 8 million views in 4 hours. On Twitter, Lydia Bancroft and No Love No Chains trended #1 and #3. Across Manhattan, from Upper East Side clubs to downtown art cafes, everyone talked about the dark-haired woman who stood before a red and black painting, calm as a hurricane's eye. Ezra didn't see it. He'd locked himself in a rental on the Upper East Side. The Bancroft estate had been secured by Lydia's lawyers, and he couldn't get in. His phone was silenced, buried in a drawer. He spent the night on his bathroom floor, staring at the grout lines, realizing his 37 years had been scripted by Sera and his own vanity, and he'd been barely more than a prop. Late afternoon, the doorbell rang. He ignored it. It rang for 10 minutes. Finally, he dragged himself to the door, unlatched the chain, and a thick envelope slid through the crack. Inside was one photograph, their wedding day. Lydia in lace, holding up her grandmother's diamond with one hand, her other arm linked through his, her smile bright as all Manhattan's lights. On the back, a ballpoint scrawl. She said she doesn't regret it. But you know what she said next? She doesn't regret it because she realized she never really had you. The cruelest breakup isn't hate, it's being forgotten. And it's already started. No signature. He could guess. Sera's last spite, or some bored old friend. It didn't matter. The line drove into his chest like a needle. He pressed the photo to his chest and sobbed. An animal sound, from deep in his gut. He knelt on the rug, forehead to the cold floor, tears soaking the edges of the photograph. At that same moment, across town, Lydia signed paperwork in Helen's conference room, an agreement to acquire an additional 4.8% of Bancroft Group shares. Combined with her existing 15%, she'd become the third largest individual shareholder. You realize what this means? Helen capped her pen. You're no longer just the ex-CEO's wife. You're a bona fide decision-maker. Next board meeting, you're not at the end of the table. Lydia pushed the documents aside and picked up her coffee. I don't want to control what he built, Helen. I want to make it better than he ever did. Not to prove a point. Just so the 6,000 people who depend on this company don't lose their jobs because of one man's stupidity. Politicians answer. Helen raised her mug. I like it. Outside, Manhattan's autumn sun blazed gold through the blinds, striping Lydia's profile and her grandmother's pearls. She looked like a Rembrandt, quiet, weighty, light rising from the dark. Ezra vanished for a week. He didn't call friends, answer his lawyer, or show up to testify at Sera's preliminary hearing. The judge issued a material witness warrant. When marshals entered his apartment, they found only a scribbled note, pinned under an empty bottle. "Gone to clean up the mess I made. Don't look for me." Henry Knowles faxed a copy to Helen with a note. "If he doesn't surface before next week's audit report, we have to file CEO disappearance with the SEC. Stock will panic." Helen tossed the fax at Lydia. "So where is he? Suicide? Flight? Or really cleaning up?" Lydia studied the scrawl. Ezra's drunk handwriting, she knew it well. 3 years of marriage meant recognizing his shopping lists, meeting notes, even the baby names he'd doodled on a napkin at midnight and crumpled by dawn. "He won't kill himself. Too narcissistic," she shrugged. "And he can't run, his passport's impounded. He's probably gone somewhere he thinks he can atone. The library where we met. His mother's grave. His family's old house in the Hamptons." Helen raised an eyebrow. "You still know him that well?" 3 years of marriage, even enemies, you pick up habits. Lydia walked to the window. "But I'm not going after him. If he wants to face it, he'll walk back. If not, his absence only makes his testimony worse." She said it lightly, but Helen noticed her thumb working the rim of her coffee mug over and over, the glaze wearing thin. That night, Lydia went home early, made a simple pasta, poured a glass of red, and turned on CNN for background noise. A breaking news banner scrolled across the screen. Manhattan DA confirms the domestic violence and negligent homicide case against former Bancroft Group CEO Ezra Bancroft will proceed to pre-trial next month. Meanwhile, the FBI's investigation into Sera Morrison's fraud has expanded. Sources say Morrison has implicated a former Bancroft finance executive in a scheme to falsify company accounts and conceal illegal fund transfers. Lydia's fork stopped mid-air. She cranked the volume. That executive, Robert Harding, was arrested this afternoon at JFK while boarding a private flight to the Cayman Islands. The FBI says the total amount involved may exceed $12 million, tied to multiple overseas investments over the past several years. Ezra Bancroft, as sitting CEO during the period, has not yet been charged but is listed as a key witness. Lydia put down her fork and called Helen. One ring. Helen had been watching the same feed. "You know Robert Harding?" Lydia asked. "College roommate of Ezra's. Your husband recruited him into finance 5 years ago, promoted him to deputy director 3 years later. Everyone assumed they were just college buddies, but now it looks deeper." "Meaning Ezra might not just be a victim, he might have been part of Sera's laundering operation?" Helen paused. Too early to say. But Sera didn't design a 3-tier transfer system on her own. She doesn't have the background. Someone helped her build it. Could be Robert. Could be Ezra himself. The key is how unaware Ezra really was. Lydia paced, phone at her ear. She remembered the first year of their marriage. Ezra coming home late from the office, exhausted, coffee stains on his cuffs. He'd sat on the edge of the bed and held her hand. "Lydia, sometimes I make decisions I can't fully stand behind. But I just keep moving forward." She thought he was talking about an acquisition. Now she heard something else in those words. "Helen, I need you to set up a meeting with Robert Harding's defense attorney. I need to know exactly what part Ezra played. If he was a willing participant, we change strategy on both the divorce and the criminal front." "Already on it. Also, the court approved our asset freeze on the estate. Appraisers are coming next week. Your clothing, jewelry, and your grandmother's things are already transferred out. But that ring. Are you sure you can't get someone to fish it out? That section of sewer is a closed system. With the city's help, theoretically." "No," Lydia cut her off. "That ring is safer in that sewer than in any auction house. It isn't wealth anymore, it's freedom. Grandmother would understand." She hung up and stood at the window. No rain tonight. The sky was impossibly clear, a few stars stubbornly visible through the city's glow. She looked at the dark crown of Central Park in the distance and said, softly, Ezra, where are you? No one answered. She hadn't expected one. Robert Harding's defense attorney was Christine Delgado, a middle-aged woman known for white-collar expertise, expensive and sharp. Helen met her in a quiet Williamsburg cafe. No appointments, no recording, just information exchange. Delgado cut straight to it. My client is willing to trade insider knowledge for reduced charges. The condition is your side doesn't leak it to media before formal indictment. Helen stirred her latte. Depends on the value. Delgado slid a printed summary across the table. Sera Morrison injected $3.5 million into Bancroft Group's strategic investment fund last April through an offshore shell company labeled Foreign Tech Partnership Funds. 3 months later, that money was transferred in 4 installments to Ezra Bancroft's personal account as consulting fees. Each transfer stayed just under $1 million, below the bank's automatic money laundering trigger. Helen narrowed her eyes. So Sera used her own money, the money she'd scammed, to funnel back to Ezra? More precisely, a loop. Sera's funds, from various sources, including other marks and middlemen, went through shell companies into Bancroft's edge projects. Robert Harding signed them off as legitimate business expenses, routing them to Ezra's personal accounts. Ezra kept a cut as commission, and the remainder went back to Sera through Robert's investment network. Cleaned money with paper for every step. Helen sat back. Did Ezra know? Delgado's smile was thin. My client says Ezra knew the broad strokes, but never asked for details. How a judge reads that depends on the day. But here's a more critical detail. Ezra's been in New York all week, not missing. He's looking for someone. Who? His former risk manager at Deutsche Bank, the one who designed this system. Alvin Choi. Ezra realized that after Robert fell, Alvin would be next. He's trying to reach him before the feds do. Maybe to silence him, maybe to get his own evidence before cooperating. Helen brought the information back to Lydia. They sat under lamplight, tracing money flows on printouts. So Ezra wasn't just a victim, he was a half-partner. Lydia's voice was quiet, but not surprised. And I'm not even shocked. He always treated gray areas as flexibility and violations as innovation. I thought he only did that to others. Turns out he did it to himself too. Helen laid out the options. 1. Use this in divorce court. Strip him bare and send him to prison. 2. Use it as leverage. Make him testify against higher-ups in exchange for more equity and business advantage. Lydia folded the money map and put it in her drawer. I pick option 3. I want him on his knees telling me everything himself. I want to hear him admit he didn't just hurt me, he defrauded everyone who trusted him. Then we need to find him. Where's Alvin Choi? I don't know, Lydia said, grabbing her coat. But I know who does. Ezra's mother. Margaret Bancroft lives in a Long Island care facility. She talks to him every Wednesday night. Tonight is Wednesday. You're going yourself? Helen called after her. Some conversations are only for one person. Morning Light Manor was a private care facility on Long Island's North Shore, nestled in old oaks, cottage-style buildings, full-time nurses, Michelin star meals. The Bancroft family paid $500,000 a year for Margaret's care, but no price could cure her Alzheimer's. Margaret sat by her window in a wheelchair, watching the yellowing ginkgo leaves as if they held answers only she could see. When Lydia entered, the attendant murmured, "She's had a good day, half a bowl of pumpkin soup." Then she slipped out. Lydia sat on the low stool across from Margaret and took the thin, age-spotted hands. Margaret turned slowly, her clouded blue eyes focusing for a few seconds, and a vague smile surfaced. You're Lydia, aren't you? The girl from Boston. Ezra married you. He told me about you. Her voice crackled like an old radio. Did you bring the ring? He told me about that ring. Your grandmother's. Lovely. Lydia's throat tightened. She swallowed it down. Margaret, I came to ask you something. Has Ezra contacted you recently? Did he mention he was looking for someone? Margaret's brow knitted, sifting through fragments. He called 2 days ago. He was crying. He said he'd done something wrong. Very wrong. He said he was looking for someone named Choi. Someone with a key. For a box. A key? What box? I don't know, child. His memory's bad, like his father. Margaret patted Lydia's hand, dry skin rasping her knuckles. But listen to me. He's always been like this, even as a boy. When he made a mistake, he didn't run. He went deeper into the dark. He thought if he went far enough, he'd find an exit. But some tunnels don't have exits. You have to find him before he disappears, or let him hit the wall himself. Lydia studied Margaret's hands, hands that had once held an infant Ezra, written 1,000 Bancroft checks, now only bone and paper. She realized that the man she hated had once been a boy loved by this woman. I'll find him, Lydia said. Whether to save him or put him in prison, I'll find him. Margaret didn't answer. Her gaze drifted back to the ginkgo leaves, a peaceful smile on her lips. Lydia kissed her forehead and left. Outside the manor, her phone buzzed with a voice message from Helen. Alvin Choi's location is confirmed. He was holed up in a shuttered printing plant in Queens. Ezra visited last night, but left this morning. Mark's tracking him. He's headed to JFK. Lydia's heart jumped. He's running? Helen's second message came. No, he bought a ticket to Boston. Guess who he's looking for? Your father's old lawyer, Thomas Harrison. The one who set up your grandmother's trust. Ezra's trying to get Harrison to freeze it. Lydia smiled despite herself. Still so naive. Harrison's 80 years old, retired a decade ago. And he hates Bancroft men more than anyone. Ezra's father swindled one of his best clients. He won't help Ezra. Then he'll hit a dead end. But since he's going to Boston, your turf. Helen's voice carried a hunter's thrill. You want to let him stand alone in a Boston autumn with no cards left? Or do you want to be there, face to face? Lydia slid into the driver's seat and buckled up. Book me the first train to Boston tomorrow. I'm going to visit my grandmother's grave. And if he happens to be at that cemetery too, lucky him. I've got a lot to say to his face. She started the engine. The Long Island sun was setting, painting the coast gold. Her face in that light was both soft and hard, iron forged in fire, glowing and unbendable. Boston's autumn came earlier and colder than New York's. Lydia sat in South Station with a hot Americano, watching the reddening maples in the parking lot. A thick camel coat, cashmere scarf, flat Chelsea boots. This was her first trip back to the city of her childhood since leaving the Bancroft estate. The train ride was short, under 4 hours. She didn't sleep, watching the coastal view shift from industrial docks to suburban towns to New England hills. Outside Boston, she called Thomas Harrison. His voice was hoarse but clear. Lydia? Good Lord, I haven't heard from you in years. I saw the news. You all right? I'm fine, Mr. Harrison. Did a man named Ezra Bancroft come to see you this morning? A pause. He did. Sat in my old chair, begged me to freeze your grandmother's trust. Said he was preventing impulse spending. I told him you're the sole trustee. You're the only one who can sign, and I can't do a thing. Then he left. Looked. Not well. Which direction? North, I think. The Charlestown Cemetery. Your grandmother's grave, he knew about it apparently. Lydia breathed the cold autumn air. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'll visit you soon. Bring your wife's lemon tart. She's gone, son, 8 years now. Harrison's voice aged in that moment. But the thought matters. Go on, child. Some things you just have to face. Lydia hung up, left the station, and took a cab straight to Charlestown Cemetery. The iron gates were half open. The ticket booth was empty. Late October, the grounds were almost deserted, dry oak leaves falling silently onto gravestones. Lydia walked the familiar stone path past rows of Irish surnames to the northwest corner, under the great willow, where her grandmother Eleanor Sullivan's simple gray headstone stood. She lived as herself. Lydia knelt, setting white daisies at the base. She brushed leaves from the stone, her finger tracing the cold carved letters, when a crunch of footsteps came from behind. She didn't turn. She knew who it was. Ezra stood 10 paces away in a wrinkled dark jacket, collar popped against the wind. His hair was longer, his beard heavier, his face gaunt, cheekbones prominent, eyes shadowed. In his hands, a similarly white bouquet, but it had wilted in the car, petals half-browned. Lydia. His voice was raw, dehydrated. She still didn't look back. What are you doing here? You never knew my grandmother. I came to find you. He stepped forward. I knew you'd come to Boston. I knew you'd come to her. So you were waiting. Lydia finally stood and turned. Her gaze was flat as an October lake, neither love nor hate. Well, you've waited long enough. Say what you have to say. Ezra's lips parted, his eyes rapidly reddening. He dropped his gaze to his muddy shoes, like a guilty schoolboy. I'll tell you everything. Robert, Sera, the money, everything. I won't lie anymore. You should have done that a long time ago. Lydia slipped her hands into her coat pockets, tilting her head. Go ahead. I'm listening. I need to know if you're a victim or a co-conspirator, so I can decide how much room to give you. Ezra raised his head, finally meeting her eyes. The eyes that had once held warmth were now cold glass, clear and without heat. He knew what he'd lost, and that he'd never get it back. He inhaled and began. The wind came from the Hudson, rustling the willow's branches and the fringe of Lydia's scarf. Crows called from the oaks, then flew. In the quiet of the old cemetery, a man took apart the lies, weakness, and greed of the past 3 years, piece by piece, and laid them at the feet of the woman he'd once loved. She didn't pick up any of them. But she didn't walk away. She stood there, listening. The wind blew. Autumn deepened, and the story was far from over. The willow's branches brushed the tombstone's edge with a soft rustle. Lydia stood with her hands in her pockets, chin tucked into her scarf, like a stone statue weathered too long, waiting for Ezra to speak. He placed his wilted flowers beside her grandmother's stone and stepped back, hands at his sides like a prisoner. I reconnected with Sera at a finance summit in Chicago 2 years ago. His voice was dry. She said she'd just divorced, needed a job. I gave her a token position at one of Bancroft Group's subsidiaries. I had no idea what she was planning. But then, Lydia asked, when did you go from unaware to complicit? Ezra swallowed. About a year ago. Robert came to me, said Sera had landed an overseas investor and needed to route funds through my personal account. Just a formality for compliance. I was busy with a European acquisition, didn't think twice. I signed the first authorization. How much did you take? First wire, 300,000. I didn't ask where it came from. I was afraid to. He stared at his own hands, hands that had lifted champagne flutes, signed merger contracts, touched her hair, now trembling. Eventually, the total was around 4 million. I kept a cut as commission, and Robert routed the rest to Sera's Cayman accounts. I knew it was laundering. I knew from the start, deep down. But I told myself it was overseas investor money. None of my business. Lydia exhaled a white plume in the cold air. So not only did you hit your wife and lose your child, you used your wife's name and status as cover for a multi-million-dollar money laundering operation. Ezra, What else were you capable of? Ezra's head snapped up, eyes bloodshot. I never meant to hurt you. I compartmentalized all of it as work. I thought as long as you didn't know, you wouldn't be affected. You let me sit beside you at every charity gala. Let me carry the Mrs. Bancroft title, while you used my family's name and reputation to launder dirty money. You think keeping me in the dark was protection? It was exploitation. Her voice cracked just slightly, then sealed again in the cold. Ezra's shoulders slumped. He was silent for a long moment, the crows returning to the oaks. Finally, Alvin Choi, the man who built this system, he had a complete trail. Shell companies, signatures, bank statements. When I found him, he wouldn't give it to me. He said, "You're only here because you're out of options. If I give this to you, you'll destroy it. I'll hand it to the feds myself." So he has more integrity than you? Lydia's smile was bitter. No, just more experience. At Deutsche Bank, he saw too many people like me, trying to burn the evidence at the last minute. He knew what real cooperation looked like. Ezra's laugh was hollow. Now, I don't even have the right to destroy anything. All I have is my word. You tell me what to say, who to testify against, I'll do it. Lydia studied him a long time. From his tangled hair to his hollow cheeks, his swollen eyes, his cracked lips. The arrogant peacock from the gala was dead. All that remained was wet feathers and broken bones. I'm not going to tell you where to point, she said at last. One thing, tell the truth to the prosecutors. Everything. No omissions, no embellishments, no cover-ups. Then let the law decide. Ezra nodded, as if receiving a mercy he didn't deserve. One more thing. Lydia bent and picked up his wilted flowers, placing them gently beside her own white daisies. You don't owe me an apology. You owe one to the child we never got to meet. Tell it to him. Ezra dropped to his knees on the cold earth, forehead against the gravestone, his shoulders heaving. His voice, fractured and barely recognizable, forced its way out. I'm sorry. Daddy's sorry. I couldn't protect you. I didn't even know you existed. I was so selfish. Lydia turned and walked toward the gate. She didn't look back at him kneeling there, weeping. She walked slowly, letting the wind dry the few tears that slipped from her own eyes. She didn't cry. Not really. But a hot tightness lodged in her chest. At the gate, she pulled out her phone and sent Helen a voice message. He confessed everything. Tell Mark to call the DA. We'll bring Ezra in for a full statement tomorrow morning. And book me a hotel in Boston. I need a couple of days to think. Helen replied instantly. Done. Also, the interim CEO search committee meets tomorrow. You're a third largest shareholder. Got the virtual invite? Lydia checked her email. Yes, a formal meeting notice from Henry Knowles. Preliminary discussion of CEO succession candidates. She scrolled through the attachments. The usual Wall Street veterans. White males in their 60s. Impeccable but uninspired. Then she reached the bottom of the page. Rachel Jiang, 42, current VP of Bancroft Group Europe, former McKinsey senior partner, double doctorate from MIT in engineering and business. Lydia remembered her. 3 years ago, at the Bancroft Christmas party, she'd seen Rachel from across the room. Cropped hair, wire-rimmed glasses, standing among a cluster of suits like a knife in a stack of butter. Ezra and the directors were debating European expansion, and Rachel had calmly pointed out 3 critical data errors in their model. The room went silent. Lydia stared at the name, then texted Helen, I'll attend the meeting tomorrow, and I want to recommend someone. Not as a candidate, but as a direction the board should take seriously. Helen sent back a question mark. Lydia pocketed her phone without explaining. She left the cemetery, standing on the quiet street of Charlestown as the sun sank behind the old church steeple, painting everything gold. She exhaled a white mist and felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness. Just the realization that the next chapter of her life didn't have to revolve around his mistakes. She had a direction now. Bancroft Group's future, a leader like Rachel Jiang, a structure that could be rebuilt from the ashes. She hailed a cab. Beacon Hill, any quiet hotel. The driver glanced in the rear view, maybe recognizing the young woman in camel wool and autumn leaves, but said nothing. The cab rolled through Boston Common, red gold trees flashing past one by one. Lydia pressed her forehead to the cool glass, watching her reflection merge with the city outside. She remembered her grandmother's words. Sometimes you take the wrong road, not to return to where you started. She closed her eyes. The Federal Detention Center in Brooklyn was a gray concrete slab with high walls and razor wire, not a single tree at its entrance, just bare cement and black vans. Lydia came with Helen. Ezra was in another interrogation room giving his statement. Their target. Sera Morrison. Sure you want to do this? Helen asked at the metal detector, sliding her bag into the tray. She'll say ugly things. I'm not afraid of ugly, Lydia said. I'm afraid of not knowing what she's still holding. The visitation room was narrow, divided by bulletproof glass, with phones on each side. Sera was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair stringy, her manicure half gone, dirt caked under her nails. When she saw Lydia, her lips curved into a reflex smile. The muscle memory of a performer. Mrs. Bancroft. She lifted the phone, her voice tinged with static. Come to admire your prize? Lydia picked up her receiver calmly. I came to hear the truth. You're already charged with fraud against my husband, but I know there's someone else behind you. You didn't design a 3-tier transfer system by yourself. Sera leaned back, cocking her head like a caged cat. Why would I help you? Because your sentence is still pending. Robert Harding has already given up part of it. Ezra's testifying in the next room. If you don't speak first, everything falls on you. That money you and Danny ran off with won't buy you enough smokes for a federal sentence. But if you name the offshore lawyer who set up those shells, the DA might drop your time to under 3 years. Sera's smile faded. She picked at the plastic receiver. You're smarter than your husband. He never saw through me in 3 years. You saw it in one night. He didn't want to. He wanted to save you. I don't have any interest in you, only the truth. Sera laughed low, almost spooky through the static. All right, Mrs. Bancroft. I'll tell you something your husband will never say. His father, Old Man Bancroft, had been working with that Cayman firm for 20 years before he died. This system wasn't my invention. Ezra inherited it from his dad. His father just did it cleaner. Ezra was sloppy. Lydia's hand tightened on the phone. So Bancroft Group's dirty money goes back to Ezra's father? More than that. Sera leaned close to the glass, her lips almost touching it. His uncle, Vincent Bancroft, the retired director, is still drawing consulting fees from those offshore accounts. If you really want to sink this ship, Ezra's testimony isn't enough. You need Vincent's signature trail, and only one person knows where that trail is, Alvin Choi. Alvin already gave everything to the FBI. Sera sat up straight. Everything, or part of it? Everything. Flow charts, shell companies, bank statements. Sera slumped back, her face collapsing. Then Vincent will run. He's already packed. Lydia hung up and turned to Helen. Call Mark, watch Vincent Bancroft's departure records. If Sera's telling the truth, Vincent is the top of the chain. Helen was already dialing. 3 minutes later, Mark says Vincent filed a private flight to Switzerland this morning. Departure in 40 minutes. Can we stop him? Mark's already called FBI Aviation. They have grounds for a temporary no-fly. If we can give them a preliminary link to Vincent. Lydia's fist clenched. Pull part of Ezra's testimony. This morning he mentioned Uncle Vincent at least 3 times. That's enough. They ran out of the detention center. Brooklyn's cold wind hit the corridor, Lydia's boots clanging on the metal stairs. She didn't know what drove her. Maybe the fear that the old Bancroft shadow, just as she reached for its edge, would slip through her fingers again. This time, she wouldn't let anyone slip away. She would catch them all. At Teterboro Airport's private terminal, a Gulfstream G650 had completed pre-flight checks, engines humming. Two private security men flanked the staircase. At the top, an old man in dark gray cashmere, leaning on an ebony cane, ascended slowly. Vincent Bancroft was 73, his white hair perfectly combed, complexion ruddy, with none of the tremors of old age. He'd sat on the Bancroft Group board for 30 years as advisory director, never involving himself in daily decisions, yet every major transactions documents were first reviewed at his country estate. Everyone assumed he was a retired gentleman. Only a few knew how many doors his keys opened. Just as he reached the cabin door, 3 unmarked black SUVs screamed down the runway, tires screeching. Doors flew open. 6 agents in FBI vests jumped out, led by a short-haired woman with her badge held high. Vincent Bancroft, FBI. We are ordering you to stop immediately and comply with an investigation. We have a court-issued no-fly order and search warrant. Vincent paused mid-step and turned. Not a hint of panic. Just the composure of a man who'd seen storms before. Young lady, I'm on my way to my cardiologist in Zurich. You can send your documents to my attorneys. We have documents, and we have sworn testimony from your nephew Ezra Bancroft from this morning. He detailed your receipt of at least $8.5 million in consulting fees through offshore accounts over the past 5 years. There is probable cause for money laundering, tax fraud, and conspiracy to defraud. Please deplane. Vincent's grip on his cane tightened just a fraction. He was silent for 3 seconds, then gave a light sigh, like a gentleman interrupted at tea. That boy. Always too soft. He descended the stairs with steady steps, handed his cane to security, and extended his wrists for the cuffs. Passing the female agent, he murmured, "Tell Ezra hello. And let him know his father would be turning in his grave if he knew he'd gone this far." He was loaded into the back of one of the SUVs. As the door closed, Lydia stood 50 yards away behind the fence, hands in her coat pockets, watching the black convoy pull away. No triumph crossed her face. Just heavy, settled exhaustion. Helen came to her side. You did it. The whole chain. Sera, Robert, Ezra, Vincent, all in custody. The DA just messaged. They're applying for a full search warrant on Bancroft Group headquarters. Lydia nodded. I don't care what they seize. Just that the 6,000 regular employees don't get caught in it. They won't. Interim management will keep things running. Rachel Jiang did well in the selection meeting. Nala's tipped me privately that she's the favorite. Your vote could decide it. Lydia turned toward the parking lot. The late October wind carried the smell of jet fuel and autumn grass. She stopped after a few steps and looked up. A commercial jet crossed overhead, trailing white across the pale blue. She realized she'd spent the last month digging downward, unearthing filth, secrets, things buried too long. Now they were all in the open, and she stood on the surface, with open sky above. Helen set up dinner with Rachel Jiang. Not official, just 2 women talking. Helen raised an eyebrow. You're not. Not what you think. Lydia's smile was unguarded, the first warmth she'd shown. I just want to know how she stayed sane in a room full of men for so many years. Maybe she can teach me something. Helen laughed. Fine. I'll arrange it. But first you rest. You've slept maybe 20 hours this week. No calls, no emails till noon tomorrow.